the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose, where I strategize with business owners on how to grow and scale their businesses to hit their income goals. This is episode 331 of the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose. Today I'm speaking with Liz Stapleton, and we're diving into what is analysis paralysis and how can bloggers actually avoid it. Now, before we jump into this episode, I want to make sure that if you have not already left a rating and review on your favorite podcasting app, if you would so do so, because it helps to continue to get great guests. All you have to do is leave a whatever star rating you want to, and leave a quick review, whether it's from this episode or another episode. We just continue to be able to get great guests because of the reviews that guests see within their podcasting apps. So if you do that, I would so appreciate it. All right, you guys, as always, let's jump into this episode. Hi, Liz. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to be able to talk about what is analysis paralysis and how can bloggers actually avoid it. But before we do that, will you introduce yourself and your business to my audience?
Sure. So my name is Liz Stapleton. I've been blogging since 2014. And like most bloggers that have been blogging that long, I now have multiple sites. So I'm a blogger, but I have a background as an attorney. And most importantly, I'm someone who loves to make bloggers' lives easier with action-oriented content and trainings to save their sanity and help them earn more. And I do that at bloggerbreakthrough.com. I should say
Perfect.
that.
Yes, definitely. And you have an annual summit that you normally host for that as well. That's Blogger Breakthrough Summit. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's usually, it's in Q1, typically mid to end of January. I'm super excited that you agreed to be a panelist this past January.
Yes.
And that's available every year. It's free. It's awesome.
Excellent. Yes, they can definitely keep an eye out. We're obviously in March, but we're always thinking about when can we get more education, and when it's free, it's even better. So let's talk about analysis paralysis. How would you define that?
So I like to think of analysis paralysis of when you are so overwhelmed with either like information or a to-do list that you refuse to do any of it and you revert back to busy work that you know. So that could be, I'm going to just tweak my website a little. It's not perfect. Or I'm going to go create more graphics for whatever. But what it really boils down to is a fear of stepping outside your comfort zone to get those new things going. So you resort to things that won't move the needle at all.
What would you say is the number one incident that causes analysis paralysis in bloggers in particular?
I'd say information overload, right? Like, because especially when you start out, you're drinking from a fire hose, and there's so many great tools and resources. So like my summit, it's awesome, but it's 50 speakers. And I very much am like, guys, don't try to attend everything. Like, don't do that. It's too much. It takes me months to process all of this stuff. Pick a track, stick to it, whether you're beginner, intermediate, advanced. But there's also all these great bundles out there. It's the same idea. It's so much content and it's fantastic content, but you need to really kind of pick one thing to focus and work on implementing before you dive into other stuff. I think like everyone just shiny object. They want to keep going. They want, and learning's fun and it's not nearly as hard as taking action.
Yes, no, so true. And I think some of us, especially those who probably consider themselves type A, are also have a tendency to be eternal learners. We love all the information. We want to listen and do it all and listen to all the people. But sometimes it's really hard to kind of wade through the noise to figure out what steps do I have to take. So how can we actually determine those steps? Like, how do we figure out what's the right steps for me?
Sure. So I think there's a couple different ways you can go about it, right? Because first of all, especially if you're type A, make your list. Make your list, go through there. And I'd say pick something. I'd go with either something that you know for sure is going to move the needle, or if you're not sure what's going to work best, go with what scares you most. And like, be like, okay, I'm going to work on this for just like 15 minutes today. I'm going to say it's a win if I can work on this for 15 minutes. And a lot of times you get sucked in, you work in longer than 15 minutes, but it gets you going. Like you don't need to get everything done that day. It doesn't need to be perfect. I am a big encourager of taking imperfect action, and that done is better than perfect. Very few things can't be changed or updated later. So that's really, I think, kind of one of the best ways to go about it is to just pick one thing, right? And it could be, and give it time to work. So don't go trying another strategy related to that until you've given it time to work. Go work on something else, a new strategy, sure. But give stuff time to work. I think that's a lot of, where the shiny object syndrome comes from, is we do something and we're like, great, it should be instant results. And that's not true, especially in blogging. Like you might have some little quick wins, but in reality, stuff takes time. So, if there's stuff you need to do to kind of keep it going while you see if it's going to work, add that to your to-do list, make it something easy to knock out. And then if you want to start something new, make it something unrelated, like a completely different path, because you're not going to know what worked then if you're doing multiple strategies at once.
Absolutely. So I have 2 questions actually that lead up to that. So first is, what is a significant amount of time would you to leave it so that you're actually testing that strategy? Because that is something that I see. I see a blogger saying to me, oh, I tried it for 3 days. It didn't work. It's not working. It doesn't fit my audience. What would you recommend?
So it depends on what you're doing, right? If you're doing like SEO, 3 to 6 months. If you're doing running ads, depending on your budget, obviously, and how much like that's going to play into that, but probably at least a couple weeks, right? To really get enough traction and interaction to see what's working. So it kind of depends on what it is you're doing, in which case, hopefully your research has told you how long you need to give it to work.
Yes. So you actually answered my second question, because that was my second question was going to be, and which things are we supposed to be taking a look at when we're actually tracking this? So the first thing, of course, newer bloggers are thinking, SEO, how long? And I think you nailed that right away. Sometimes even 6 months to 9 months, depending upon like niche and how you are keeping track of everything. But then also when it comes to like the email marketing side of things, I think that's an area I notice bloggers will kind of flit around the most. Well, I tested emailing my list once a week and I did it for a week and it didn't work. I'm like, that means, that math means you sent one email, right?
Yeah.
That's really not testing it now, is it? Same thing with like our social media strategies as far as Instagram or Pinterest or whatever else it can be. So I think that it is important. I like to always tell people, look at things for 6 weeks, really test it and be consistent, because if you're not being consistent, you're not really working with the right amount of data. Like if I was back in my research days in college, I'd be told, nope, start over. That didn't count. So I think that that's important to really think about. You have to be consistently putting that out there in order for it to work.
And I think you kind of hit on another thing is you need a big enough data pool. So newer bloggers might take longer to test something because it's going to take longer to get that much data than more established bloggers, right? So if you need 100 page views to a post to see if it's converting, well, someone who's brand new at blogging, that could take them 6 months. Who knows? And a really established blogger, that could be 2 days or less, like it just really depends. So don't try to be like, well, that blogger managed to figure it out in 2 days. Well, they might have a completely different, amount of data to work with than you do.
So smart. And it just goes to that idea of not comparing your middle to someone's end or someone's beginning or whatever that looks like for them. Because this is whether you've been blogging for 10 years and you've never tried a product, or you've been blogging for a year and you've tried a product. Your list size can be very different in how you have maintained it, engaged with them, nurtured them. So moving forward, and determining whether if it's going to be a successful product launch or not can be very different. So I think it's so important. And I think for a lot of us that are creatives, we hate the numbers, but the numbers are so important in such a huge piece of being able to determine, okay, do I move on to my next strategy, to the next best thing that I'm going to do? So let's talk about, how do we get unstuck from analysis paralysis? We're in it. We keep going to the same thing on our to-do list that we know that we're just knocking it off of our to-do list to knock it off. How do we get past that and actually move the needle?
I think you've got to really look at planning. So taking a step back to look at your bigger picture and what your goals are, and then to see, okay, what is on my to-do list that's actually moving towards those goals and what isn't, and get rid of it. I always try to do this every couple of months, especially as we're recording this, it's towards the end of the year, and I'm looking towards next year, and, I'm stepping back and I'm like, you know what, this task, it doesn't take a lot of time. I do it every week, but it's not actually producing a lot of results. I could probably let that go. And someday when I'm like tired and don't have energy for other things, I can go do that a little bit and it will help some, but it's not a huge needle mover. And so, really taking the time to take the step back. I think so often we get caught up in the nitty-gritty details in the like working in our business that we don't step back to work on our business. And so you've got to really, take a step back. It's amazing the like insights you will get from your blog and what you're doing when you take a step back. And that could be, sometimes people have a hard time stepping back. So maybe sit down with a friend and then have them ask you, what is it you do? And yes. Just trying to explain that can help really clarify a lot of things, because I'll tell you, a lot of people like this is like a foreign language to people who aren't in it. It really is. I've been doing this for almost 10 years or something. I've been doing it 8 years, and most of my family still doesn't quite know what I do. So, trying to kind of explain it to someone will help provide you with some clarity if stepping back is something you struggle with.
Yes. And I think it is a huge piece that we all often forget, is that positioning, right? Being able to say who you help and what problem you solve for them is such a huge piece of this. Because a lot of times, a lot of us, when we started, we were just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall. We were just kind of like, let's see what's going to work. We're going to be creative. We're just going to do the things, and, you'll build it, they'll come. Yeah. And I think now that you have to be so pointed in what you are writing, it's really important, especially for SEO purposes, that you know the problem that you serve and what you are trying to be an expert in when you are speaking to your audience. Whether you see yourself as that expert or not, Google needs to see you as that expert if you are determining that you want to solve that problem for your audience. So I think that is such a good point. So how can we actually try to avoid analysis paralysis altogether?
Again, planning, right? If you have a regular like planning day in your, list of things to do, so whatever tool you use, I use ClickUp, right? So I have recurring tasks, and, one of those is like, hey, you need to take a step back. I have recurring tasks of, hey, do a CEO day, check your bookkeeping, look at your big picture, things like that. So having a plan where you're checking your whatever data metrics matter to you. And that's really boring word, but whatever numbers matter to you, that's revenue, page views, email open rates, conversion rates, whatever those numbers that matter for your goals, not just like vanity metrics, but ones that tie to your goals. These are your key metrics. And seeing, okay, how can I work on doing that? So I actually, I know this isn't coming out until March, but this is the end of the year. And as I'm like looking towards next year, I'm like making notes of like, okay, hey, this had a conversion rate of whatever percent. So if I want to reach this many sales, this is how many views I need on that. How can I get that number of views? Right. And so planning my action items around that of like, okay, I need to try to get more podcasts, and this is for a different site, but, or I need to guest post more, or I need to really rev up my affiliate program, right? So there's a lot of different ways I could do that. And so when you know what you're trying to get towards, it's a lot easier to zero in. I think for newer bloggers, it's harder because you don't have the data to really know what, you should be focused on. So you're trying a lot of different things. But I would say stick with trying to get good at get really, really good at one thing. And before you try to take on something else, and, make sure you're constantly stepping back on that one thing, be like, okay, am I getting better? Is this working? How can I tell? What could I do differently? And just step back and brainstorm. I think there's so many things that we're like, we do it because we're supposed to have an email list. We're supposed to email our list. We're supposed to, whatever. But if you take a step back, you might find that your kind of unique perspective, you'll come up with a twist on something that, you don't really see a lot. And that's kind of exciting for you, for your audience, because it's not the same old thing over and over again. So, and it may not always work out, but I think you've got to try it at least once. And I would say more than once. That's one thing so I've been doing this 8 years. I still learn. I'm still I go to my own summits and paid trainings and all that stuff. And one thing that really stuck with me with one I did in 2022 was you need to run something at least 3 times to know if it's going to work or not, which I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I haven't been doing that, So I think that is a great kind of piece of advice is you won't know if it's working from, like you said, from trying it one time. I emailed my list once a week once, that's, you're not going to know. So you've got to try it a few times because you are going to get better. Your back end is going to get better. Your organization is going to get better, and you'll be able to streamline and see if it's really going to work or not.
Yes. And I love the way that you talk about that it has to start with the goal, because I think a lot of times when people come into my mastermind programs, they'll tell me, oh, I want to increase my revenue to 5K by the end, consistently by the end of the 6-month period. And then they kind of look at me and like, okay, how do I do that? And, okay, well, what are our revenue streams? How are we doing this? And what's going to be able to help you to increase that revenue? And it really depends. And I think a lot of listeners are going, okay, yeah, Jenny, tell me how to do that. Do that 5,000. How do I make that happen? And I think it comes down to looking where you are and then trying to be able to figure out which steps you can take to improve upon. I think anytime revenue comes into play, I think if you're looking at page views that are going to increase your ads, which a lot of bloggers like to do, sure. SEO is obviously number one. And then having that list is going to be important. And then looking to see, okay, how else am I monetizing? Am I doing it through sponsorships? Am I thinking about maybe my own product or my own service? And then getting in there and figuring out, okay, if I am going to launch my own product or service, I need to have a larger list. I need to be doing strategies that are going to help me grow my list. Bundles. Yep. I'm going to do a summit. I'm going to do a list swap. I'm going to do these things that are going to move the needle on the number of subscribers that I have on my list. And I think that that's the piece where a lot of people get stuck, right? They don't know, they can look long-term and look at the goal, but they'll be like, I don't know what steps to take next. Where do I go?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ever find that there's foundational things that bloggers are missing that absolutely, no matter if they're beginning, middle, or advanced, have to go back and make sure that it is fixed before they can really continue to move forward?
The legal stuff.
Okay.
That's a big thing. I think people don't even think about.
Yes.
And that's, I do, like I said, background as a lawyer. I do have another site that's like legal templates for bloggers, right? But I think definitely you need to go through and make sure that you have the right policies in places, but also that you're properly displaying whatever disclosures or disclaimers you need to. I see the biggest mistake is, people will set it up so their site, it shows on every page. Great. Where are you doing it in your email? They don't even add it in email, or it's in the wrong place in email. And so that is, I think, a foundational thing. I mean, if you're an advanced blogger, can hire a lawyer, awesome. Do that. That is always going to be the best option. But a lot of people can't afford that. So if you're not in that boat, look for templates from lawyers who are also bloggers, who understand the various things that you are probably doing, right? Like I said, like my family, I mean, because they know I have multiple sites. And so that's where they get tripped up because each site's different. Right. But, so like, a regular lawyer that you go to for whatever purposes, maybe registering your business, which you don't really need a lawyer to do that, but or for buying a house or whatever it is, creating a will. They're like the online world, totally different. Right. Okay. And there's a lot of great lawyers and a lot of great law firms that focus on serving that audience. So look at those as opposed to just your local lawyer. So getting the legal stuff. And then I'd say beyond that, they're like, why isn't my list growing? Right. Or something like that, because that's almost a key thing. Because your website should be converting generally 2% of your audience to your list. That is a good conversion rate. If you are like 0.1%, something is wrong. It's like, well, where are your opt-ins? Are they visible? Are they eye-catching? Oh, do you only have it in your footer and nowhere else on your site? well, are they getting all the way down to the footer? So like there's things like that can be easily fixed that can make a big difference in the long term. So I'd say those are kind of, I feel like the two biggest is the legal stuff of people just completely ignoring it, or they're using free templates that aren't really covering them. Or, I'd say like just not taking a step back. Oh, this is what I mean is like taking a step back, go look at your website in an incognito window and play around and see what you see and find what you find and be like, wait, where is this? Because your backend and your, kind of vision in your head of what your website looks like could be totally different than what the user is really experiencing.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah. I always recommend, hey, when's the last time you went and looked at your site in an incognito window?
Yes.
Play around.
Oh, I love that. And I think too, like, I love the fact that you brought up where is your opt-in, because I think that is something that I think a lot of people will struggle with. And I have a lot of bloggers that come to me that have 300,000 page views, but they have opt-in. They'll say, oh, I have a newsletter, and they just sign up for my newsletter and it pops up. And that's how I've been getting people, because they've been getting 300,000 page views consistently for years upon years upon years.
Yeah.
So because of that, having to go back, fix that opt-in, make sure that it's where it's supposed to be, that it's specific enough for your people so that you're not just giving away your favorite 10 recipes that have nothing to do with what you're trying to sell, is going to be important. And even if you're starting out, making sure that even if you don't have traffic yet, I'd work on an opt-in before I would continue to put content out there, because why are you putting out content if you don't have a chance of actually keeping those people and getting them onto your list? I think that's a huge mistake that I personally made as a lifestyle blogger for so many years. So being able to fix that, I think, is a very large part of what needs to be done to continue to move forward.
Yes, I would agree.
Oh, excellent. So tell me more about your blogging success planner that you have.
Sure. So I have a free version and a premium version, but it's laid out to help you focus on, okay, what is the blog content you're producing this month? What is the goal of it? What is, are there any promotions going on this month that you need to take into account? What are you going to be emailing your list? And just really writing that all out, because getting it out of your head can be a huge help. And then the premium version, which, after you opt in, you'll have an option to buy, right? Includes a growth plan that every week you get, and it's just like, hey, month 1, we're going to work on content planning. Month 2, we're going to work on batching. Month 3, we're going to work on monetize, whatever. I'm making these up. Those are in there. I don't remember what months they are. It all makes sense. But you get an email every week being like, hey, this is what we're focused on. Here's some additional like content and resources to help you learn this so that you can take action. And so the planner is really just to help you get things out of your head and to focus on like one thing each month, or, the content that you're producing and making sure it ties towards your goals. So that's really kind of what that's about.
Excellent. We're going to make sure that we link to that in the show notes. We'll have the free version and then also a link to be able to grab that premium version as well. Liz, where are the best places to connect with you?
Honestly, email. I am on social. I would not say I'm good at social. If you want to reach out to me, hello@elizabethstapleton.com. Send me an email. I can be sometimes slow to go through email. I have a VA that helps me with it, but I do respond to emails. I like barely know how to do Instagram, guys. Like, I'm like, oh wait, there's a DM. Where do I find that? Like, it's pretty bad. It's one of my goals to get better at, but again, it's not a huge goal that's going to move my needle. So it's pretty low on the priority list.
Yep.
So email, just shoot me an email if you want to reach out.
Excellent. Perfect. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and my audience. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I've provided some helpful tips.
Definitely did. All right. Well, there you have it. So if you are trying to avoid analysis paralysis or trying to get out of it, it clearly is related to you determining what your goals are and what strategies, what steps you're going to take to actually move the needle and get to those goals. If you are looking for a program that can help you do so, fill out an application for my mastermind programs. As you heard me talk about, this is something that we routinely go over, and we make strides to make sure that we are hitting those 6-month goals. I also appreciate it so much when you guys leave a rating review on your favorite podcasting app. If you take the time to do so, it helps to continue to get great guests on the show. All right, you guys, until next time, I will see you all then.